I have something a little different for you today. This actually isn't an SNMP RTU at all. It's actually an expansion shelf for one. So the idea here is when you put your RTU out at your remote site, you have to make a best guess about how many inputs and outputs you're going to need. But at some point you might have unexpected growth and you might fill up. Now if you have an RTU that doesn't support expansions, that's it. You're going to have to just buy a bigger remote, and hopefully you have a site where you can use the old one, so it's not just a total waste. An expansion shelf like this, if your RTU supports it, is a great way to just add on to the inputs and outputs after the fact, even though you hadn't planned for it originally. So when you're shopping for an RTU, look for expansion shelf support because it is a handy tool to have down the road. So let's take a look at the size of this device. This is a 1 rack unit, standard 19 or 23-inch rack mount. We'll ship you both sets of ears. You can also get creative with wall mounting if you really just don't have rack space. So a lot of different mounting options. Give us a call if you're in a unique situation and we'll help you out. On the front panel here, you have a craft port. This is a DB9. We'll ship you a cable that you plug into the USB port on your computer and you can connect to this. The configuration here is incredibly minimal. This isn't a full RTU. This is just an expansion. You're just going to tell it, how do I communicate with the RTU? Very basic settings. You'll do that here using terminal software. Then we have some status LEDs. This tells you about your alarm status, whether you have an analog threshold or a relay that's operating. These are just handy if you're doing some initial configuration, or if you happen to be out at the site and you're trying to figure out an alarm situation, you can look at the LEDs and get some hints there. There's an ACK button, so if something has happened and one of the LEDs is blinking, you just come over here and you click that ACK button. You can hear it clicking. And that will tell it, okay, stop blinking, I see you, and that clears the alarm interface so that if you're looking at these LEDs, you'll still see a solid light to say, yes, there's still an alarm, but it frees up some capacity in the interface to tell you, oh, I better start blinking again because there's a new alarm. If you're not doing that, it's a little tougher to tell when something new comes in. So if you're out at the site and you're working on something, just give the button a press. You're telling the device, yeah, I'm working on it. Support phone number, we put this on everything. You can always call into tech support, it's free. So just use the phone number. It doesn't matter what time of day or night. We have our main business hours, but we're also available through an emergency pager, and we'll get back to you within a couple minutes if you just press the right buttons on the voice prompt. So always have tech support available no matter when you call. And now moving on to the back panel. This is a dual powered model, and this is neg 48 volts. So there's some plus 24 devices. We have neg 48, a couple different standards. If you need AC, we'll give you a transformer. So whatever power input you need, just let us know. Dual power inputs necessitate dual fuses. Otherwise, a single fuse blowout could take down both power feeds. So you get two. They're GMT fuses, which is a standard. They just slide in and out into the slots here. So they're pretty straightforward. Just watch the orientation if you're unfamiliar with these, because it can be a little bit tempting to try to put them in the wrong way, and they will not go in. They're keyed, so it'll just slow you down a little bit, but just make sure you get the orientation right. I always remember that this little handle here, this little notch, faces to the left when I go to insert them. Then you have analog 7 and 8 that we put on a special connector just because we have some 50 pin connectors and we just needed a few more pins. So analog 7 and 8 just hang out here. And then here you'll see that we have a 50 pin Amphenol that has 6 analogs. As I say, 7 and 8 are out here. You have 25 to 32 discretes because the first 24 are on the other Amphenol. And then you have 8 control relays. So the capacity of this unit, 8 analogs, 32 discretes, and 8 relays. And this will effectively double a NetGuardian 832AG5 on which this hardware is based. So it is a unit that will double the capacity if you've run out of alarms and controls and analog inputs. So then to finish us off here, we have some ports to communicate with other DX units and the base unit. So if you look at this little table, you can see that there are some dip switches. And this is, if you've done a hard drive install, it's similar to that. You're going to set some switches in a particular config. If this is unit 1 in the stack, meaning it's the first one below the base, you're going to set switch 1 to on and switch 2 to off, and so on down the line. You can build a stack of up to 3 of these DXs off the base, which would quadruple your capacity. So that would be a huge increase if you just had a lot of growth that you hadn't anticipated. And to access those switches, we have hatches on the top. You just undo the one screw and then swing it around, use the slot with your screwdriver. It'll expose the dip switches and you can set them. You have 2 hatches because you've got one for the DX config here, and you have another for your 8 analogs. Those can be configured for voltage or current operation, and the dip switches will change that setting. So this is a great way to expand if you, as I say, you didn't expect that your site was going to expand. A word about economics though. If you think that you're going to have future growth, it's generally more economical. If you think that's going to happen maybe 1 out of every 8 or 1 out of every 10 times, it's better to look into something like the NetGuardian 864A, which uses different alarm termination to double the number of discretes we can take in. So the price differential there is about 10% of what a shelf like this would cost. So if you think, as I say, it's going to happen maybe 1 out of every 8 to 10 times, just go for the 864 at all your sites, and then you're starting off with twice as much capacity, and you may never need a shelf like this. But if you want to be flexible, or it's very rare that you're going to have to expand, then you can go ahead and standardize on the 832A, and then just deploy these at the rare sites where you do need them. This is just an example. There are a variety of different DX models that do different capacities. So if you have a specific requirement and you want to get the right capacity without going overkill, just give us a call and talk about what you need. Our phone number is 1-800-693-0351. You can also hop on the website at www.dpstele.com and check out a variety of the different RTUs and expansion units that we have.